Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about corporate innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-empowerment. Future Squared brings you a double dose of innovation inspiration every week to help you and your company stay relevant in an era of rapid change and 10x your results in both your professional and personal life. Each week, I'll bring you corporate innovators, entrepreneurs, authors, keynote speakers, and thought leaders such as Steve Blank, David Allen, Brad Feld, Tim Harford, Karen Dillon, Jenny Blake, Neil Patel, Rand Fishkin, Pascal Finette, Ryan Blair, and Ash Moria, to name just a few. While every Friday, I'll bring you Fast Fix Friday, some quick, digestible insights to help you end your week on a high as you head off for the weekend. Future Squared is brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation hub, school and consultancy based in Melbourne, Australia and Singapore that works with companies to help them adopt the mindset, methods and tools to navigate change and survive and thrive in an era of rapid disruption. If your organization needs help coming up with ideas, testing and turning ideas into reality, incubating teams, driving cultural change, or connecting and partnering with startups, then visit www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. Welcome back to Future Squared for episode number 183 with Cy Wakeman. Cy is a dynamic international keynote speaker, business consultant, New York Times bestselling author, and global thought leader with over 25 years experience cultivating a revolutionary new approach to leadership. Named one of the top 100 leadership experts to follow on Twitter, Wakeman's influence continues to build. As an expert blogger on fastcompany.com, Forbes, and the Huff Post, Wakeman's ideas have been featured on The Today Show, The Social, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, Business Insider, The Daily Muse, Success.com, and SHRM.com. She's published 3 books, Reality-Based Leadership, The Reality-Based Rules of the Workplace, and the newly released No Ego, How Leaders Can Cut the Cost of Workplace Drama and Entitlement and Drive Big Results. Her new book points out that ego-driven behaviors are the number one source of drama in workplaces today, and it's costing organizations billions annually. She says the philosophy of perfecting the environment to create employee engagement just feeds the ego and generates huge amounts of drama and emotional waste. This was an enjoyable, free-flowing conversation on what was a hectic book launch day for Cy, fresh off the Gary Vee show, and we covered a hell of a lot of ground, giving you countless takeaways. In particular, expect to learn 1. Why the ego can keep us from achieving our professional and personal goals. 2. How to silence our ego. And 3. Why elaborate employee engagement programs may be a source of entitlement and can actually be detrimental to company performance. So with that, I bring you the one and only Cy Wakeman. Welcome to the show, Cy.
Thank you. So glad to be on, Steve. I appreciate the invite.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and it's 6:30 p.m. over there you're pretty much smack bang in the middle of the United States in Omaha, Nebraska. You've recently done the Gary Vee show, but you've dug deep to appear on Future Squared today, so thank you so much for giving up some time.
I appreciate being on. It's fun to be on a global show. It's not often I get the opportunity to do that, so thank you.
Fantastic. So, First and foremost, Cy, how would you describe yourself? Say you're at a dinner party, you're sitting next to someone who's never met you before, they're unfamiliar with your work. How do you describe yourself in one line?
In one line, I'm a drama researcher. I research drama in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. So by drama in the workplace, you're referring to?
Emotional waste, any time or energy we spend that isn't bringing our customers joy and delight or ourselves happiness. So any unproductive thought process, any disruptive behavior, anytime we really use our energy to move against our group or ourselves or our outcomes, really anything that causes, what I would call suffering or stress in the workplace, because it just really doesn't have to be that way. Suffering is so optional. Yeah. So I'm an accidental drama researcher. I started to look at how much time we waste in the workplace on a daily basis. And it's been fascinating to see the different aspects, how life could be great or how it could be really challenging. But it's always our choice. And there's 2 ways to move through a day, with joy or misery. Yeah. Either one, you get to choose.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And what you said there about suffering is optional reminds me of an Eckhart Tolle quote where he said 90% of human suffering is self-imposed. We always have that choice to determine how we want to show up in the day. And I guess this is the premise of your new book. It's actually out today. It's book launch day for No Ego, how leaders can cut the cost of workplace drama, end entitlement, and drive big results. So, I mean, congratulations on the launch of the book, Cy.
Thank you. Thank you. We are getting just so many accolades. It's spreading like wildfire. It really proposes a whole new way of leading, and it really piggybacks on so many of the great thought leaders throughout history, whether it's Eckhart Tolle today or Byron Katie, who also launched a book today, an amazing author on being at home, A Mind at Home with Itself is her new book. I would recommend to everyone. But really the concept at work that so often we think suffering is mandatory, and we've all kind of joined this religion of suffering that, we pull up our schedule for the day and we see it's a really busy schedule and we just like default, we go, crap, must suffer. When, as Eckhart and other people talk about, suffering is not mandatory, and most of the time it really is self-imposed. And so while we are looking for our employer to make our lives, really joyful and to earn our engagement, there's not so much that's really within the power of the employer when we stop to think about it. Far more power is inside of us. It lies within us to really change the way we see our circumstances rather than really focusing on how the employer needs to change our circumstances.
Yeah, and I wanted to explore that topic of accountability versus engagement a little bit later in the conversation, Cy. And I guess first up, given that the title of your book is No Ego, obviously people have different interpretations of what the ego is. How do you define it in the context of your book?
That's a great question. A lot of people, when I talk about ego, they think about those extreme cases where somebody's really egotistical or, almost narcissistic. What I want people to realize is that ego is just a part of all of us. We all have this human condition called ego, and it's not all negative. There's some wonderful things the ego does for us, which, can be some of the formation of our confidence or kind of separating ourselves out. And there's also a lot the ego does for us when we don't understand the ego that can be really detrimental. So I find the ego is our filter on reality, and it's a pretty corrupt filter. It filters towards the negative. It is the narrative in our head that we're always creating stories and assigning motive and judgment. It's the part of us that's just always thinking. There's like this ticker tape running through our minds. And what most people don't realize is that you don't have to believe everything you think, that you're not your thinking. You're the self that's witnessing your thinking. And there's incredible freedom that comes when you unhook from that. So definition of the ego is really our filter on reality. It's like a pair of prescription sunglasses or a pair of prescription eyeglasses that we wear that really is probably the wrong prescription. It's not letting us see things clearly.
Yeah, and I draw parallels between what you've just said and Mark Manson's, he actually calls it Manson's law, which is we avoid most that which challenges our identity or our perceptions of ourselves. So we may perform well in certain aspects of life. We may be awesome, say, venture capitalists or hedge fund managers, but we will, scour at the opportunity to try something new in case we're not good at it and it questions our identity. Rather than just seeing that as an opportunity to say, put ourselves out there and learn something new, we're always seeing it as something that may threaten our identity and our opinion of ourselves.
That's a great correlation. The ego really is the attachment to an identity that narrows our world, keeps us safe, really limits our experiences, and therefore limits our innovation, our wisdom. I mean, just everything that is great about us. That ego really works hard to keep us safe, and even sees insult where there isn't any, or sees danger where there isn't any, and really keeps us locked into a certain identity and a way of doing things that ends up really limiting our success, not expanding our success. It's not something we have to fight against, but it's really something we have to be aware of so that we can limit its control over our lives.
Yeah, and I like what you said there around it limits our success. I mean, it might seem safe in the sense that if I don't go off and try this new thing, say take up, I don't know, kickboxing classes, it may limit the danger and it will preserve my existing identity. But if I go off and do that, then I'm going to learn something new. It's going to help me grow. It's going to help me become more of a disciplined, well-rounded human being. Or perhaps I'm a startup founder. And the one thing I just don't want to do is to pick up the phone and call potential prospects because I'm scared of how they're going to respond. I'm scared that they're going to hang the phone up on me. I'm scared that they're going to call me names and all that type of stuff, and that's going to hurt me, rather than seeing that as, hey, this is something I need to do. And that's also, I think it was Tim Ferriss who said we avoid most of the things we need to do the most. And for a lot of founders, it is actually getting out there, talking to people, especially a lot of introverted founders who just hate the idea of getting out there and going to a conference on their own and walking up to groups of 4 or 5 people in a circle and introducing themselves. It just seems like just every fiber in their body doesn't want to do that. But that is often the thing they need to do the most in order to start building that pipeline, building relationships, and actually growing their business.
So well said. And I must tell you, I'm that introverted founder that just, when I listen or pay too much attention to my ego, when I use that as my source of truth, it feels safe on the short term, but it really limits my connection to this incredible universe that is just waiting to help me bring my ideas to fruition, especially the ones that are based on, that wonderful inspiration that just, I believe, comes from the universe. Because, on the short term, it keeps us safe, but in the long term, it's a bad source of information. And it also keeps us from being mentally flexible. And for me, my most successful moments have been no ego moments when I am trying all sorts of new things and then using those analogies cross channels. So let's say I'm on the yoga mat and I'm a bit of a bigger person and it's pretty vulnerable for me to show up for a yoga class. And I'm on the yoga mat and I have to learn to surrender to a pose that really hurts. And then that's pre-practice for when I need to surrender something and really grind through in a workspace. And so I love that analogy that the ego would have us be mentally inflexible and interpret things too tightly and quit too early and not make those phone calls that we need to make. And when I listen to my ego, it really misinforms me. It's like, as an introvert, I believe that our personality styles, it's helpful to know what we are, but that our personality styles are really just flavors that our ego shows up in.
Yeah.
And it's really when I go beyond ego that I put it out in the universe. Like today I launched a book, and beyond ego is I did my work and I launch it, and then I just reach out to people and ask for their help. And if they love what I did, then I ask for them to help me carry it forward. And that really takes me beyond ego. Just that vulnerable place of asking for help and doing those things.
Yeah, and you effectively train your mind to do that. Like you said, you've been getting into the habit of trying lots of different things. And I personally have in my calendar, do one new thing every month. That doesn't matter how much it scares you, just go out there and do it. And by doing that, I guess you become more resilient in the face of those moments where something is challenging your ego. You realize that, you effectively, or at least in my case, I just reframe that as this is challenging my ego to this is an opportunity to learn. This is an opportunity to grow. And unless I'm willing to do this, then I'm not going to become the person that I ideally want to become.
Is so true. And I have a technique that I take it one step further, because if I put on my calendar to do one thing that scares me, I usually keep cycling through until like the 30th of the month. I schedule so that I don't have to decide what it is. I schedule a day each month. I used to do a day each week, but I schedule a day each month. I call a yes day. And anything that comes along that day, if it's not illegal or immoral, or would hurt my marriage, I yes to it. No matter how much I want to say no to it, I say yes to it. And I just let the universe decide where I'm going next.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Singer wrote the Surrender Experiment, where before he wrote The Untethered Soul, Michael Singer wrote this book, the Surrender Experiment. And he did this. I got the idea from it. So I just say yes to what happens. And I cannot tell you, it leads me into the most incredible experiences, but it's hard. There was a time I was on a plane and I had the aisle seat and I was really tired. And this guy came towards me and it was a yes day. And I'm really strict with this. I have my team do it too. He came towards me and I just knew he was going to ask for the aisle seat. And I'm like, no, he was so tall. And he goes, is there any chance that you would consider taking the middle exit row seat? I'd love the aisle seat. And it was a yes day. I'm like, yep, no problem. So I scoot over and then the person comes to the window seat and I get up and I'm kind of like trying not to be miffed about this. And I let her sit down and it's about a 4-hour flight. I've just given up my aisle seat and I'm like, it's all good. It's a yes day. I got to trust the universe.
How long was this flight?
It was like 4 hours. It was like a cross America flight. And I smell the smell of patchouli and I look over and this woman had these dreadlocks and she's sitting next to me. And I realize it's my favorite author of all times. It's Anne Lamott, the author I completely adore. So I got to sit for 4 hours and just watch her write in this journal, which I didn't even tell her who I was or introduce myself or anything. It was the most spectacular 4 hours of my life that I got to sit next to the author I adore because I said yes. And what I found out is when life isn't expanded and I'm feeling perhaps like I'm having to grind things through, it's not coming more effortless. It's because I'm saying no way too often. My ego's in charge. And if I just say yes to what comes my way, and it doesn't mean I don't have boundaries that, I'm saying yes to things maybe that would take me away from things I value, like my family for days of this time. But if I really, with a good sense, say yes, not necessarily to more work, but to more opportunity, it has opened up my life in so many ways.
Yeah. And I guess, how do you go about, you kind of touched on it there with talking about spending time with your family and friends and whatnot, but balancing that with some of the, I suppose, conventional wisdom when it comes to entrepreneurship and productivity, which is ultimately learning how to say no means we can focus and double down on the stuff that matters most.
Absolutely. So I don't want to say yes to bright, shiny objects, but you know in your gut when somebody asks you to do something a bit daring, that you kind of sense is in the flow of life. It's in the zone. It is the next step. It just scares you. It's not, of course. And when I say yes and advise people to say yes, you got to say yes with all you have so that you don't say yes and then resent it later. You got to say yes and be willing to go all in.
Yeah.
But, part of it is because I also believe in what you're saying, existentialism, where you really, focus on what's essential and double down and not get distracted by bright, shiny objects. And, I tell my team all the time, they come up with amazing new things to sell. And I'm like, sell what we have and, go deeper and stronger and richer. And so it is a balance. But what most people don't realize, because I have 8 kids, so people ask me a lot about having 8 sons and how I balance it all. And what I tell them, though, is like work-life balance is a verb, not a noun. It's not a state you can achieve as an entrepreneur or a founder.
You do.
It is something that on the daily you do. And it's more about energy. It's more about, with my kids, it's like I do travel a lot and I'm a mom. And I also know that I read a lot of studies. I was a therapist by background that said that it's not the quantity of time, it's the quality of time. It's whether you're really present. And so wholeheartedness is a greater determination than actually time. And so it's like balance your life. It's a verb, but whatever you're choosing in the moment, go all in and be all there so that you can unchoose it and then go all in to the next thing and really tap into all you have.
Yeah. And I guess, the way I interpret that is basically what you're saying is either a hell yeah or a no. And the way you determine whether or not it's a hell yeah or no, you said that, you've got to be introspective because deep down, you know whether or not you're saying no because you really shouldn't be, say, giving up time to do that because you should be focusing elsewhere, or you're saying no because, oh, that's going to be uncomfortable and I'm not really sure about that, even though deep down you know that, hey, that's something that's going to potentially leave you feeling fulfilled and awesome afterwards.
Yeah. And I think if you're self-reflective, you know when the next step on your path is presented that scares the crap out of you.
Hmm.
Um, it's not just like an ego move, like, oh, I get to do something, that would bring me more fame. It's like, oh, I need to conquer kind of slay the next dragon,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna go for it.
The reason why I gave the Muay Thai example earlier was because I've kind of been thinking about joining a Muay Thai gym for a little while, and I used to train many, many years ago, but a little part of me kept putting it back, putting it back. But the reason why, and you said you want to slay those dragons, and I guess for me, the reason why I wanted to get back into that was because at a very, very deep level, I want to have the choice to be courageous. And this isn't my quote. This is a quote I heard many years ago from a mixed martial arts trainer, and I thought that was just so profound. It's not that you want to go out there and get into fights or anything like that. That's not my style at all. But it is deep down just wanting the choice to be courageous. If a situation was to arise and you were just an onlooker that could go in and help. I think that's such an empowering thing. And deep down, I knew I just had to do it. And after putting it off for a number of months, just a few days ago, I went in and after the session, I thought, was this what I feared so much? Like, that was an amazing experience. And since then, it's just been going, every day, every day, every day. But it's like you build it up in your mind to be this big, hairy monster when really it's just, like I said, it's just in your mind. It's not reality. And just by going out there and confronting it physically in the physical form and going through whatever process you have to go through, it's just going to show you that, hey, the fear is all self-constructed and you should just get out there and do it. And hey, if you do it and you realize that this isn't for me, that's great. At least you've expended that energy that you would have otherwise wasted just thinking about it.
That Fabulous. I mean, and when I think about no ego, our ego doesn't like experimentation. Our ego doesn't like, let's go out and challenge what we think we know for sure. And, let's question our thinking. And, if our thoughts are like, oh, it's going to be too much, I don't want to commit for a year and I don't want to get back into it. And, we really need to challenge our thinking, because one of the things that will really set you free is if you realize that you don't have to believe everything you think. And, one of the biggest ways to go beyond ego is through self-reflection. And self-reflection really is the ultimate ego bypass.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to inquire, like, I'm not signing up for a lifetime. I'm signing up for a day. Why don't I just go and try it for a few days? Why don't I, it's not that I want to grow into being a fighter. I just want to grow into having the option of being able to practice courage if I ever need to.
Mm-hmm.
Those ways of reframing and getting beyond black and white and linear thinking, and that's all stuff that bypasses the ego. And self-reflection is really the foundation of accountability, and accountability is death to the ego. And so it's like, I need to be accountable to this. It's been on my mind for a while, and I owe it to myself to go and see what that's about and see if it's something I want to get back into. And that really kills the ego pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we'll talk through some steps that you've identified in terms of how do we silence our egos. But before we get to that, Cy, we've been talking a hell of a lot about ego, and I'm curious, from your research, how have you seen ego show up, say, in the corporate workplace?
It's been amazing to me as I stumbled on, it was kind of just an accidental discovery that I discovered that the average person spends about 2.5 hours a day in what we would call drama in the workplace, like 2.5 hours a day, going around like this is sick and wrong, this should not be happening, judging others, critiquing, BMW driving, which we call, bitching, moaning, and whining. And that was an amazing statistic to me. And I wanted to find out, like, what's the source of this drama, this emotional waste in the workplace? And 30% of it was ego. And here's how we defined ego. Is whenever you're involved in venting, tattling, scorekeeping, judging, comparison, arguing with reality. So let's say that, your boss wants to move in a different direction. It's all of that part of you that's like, this is sick and wrong, and it's not how this should be happening, and this is no way to run a company, and I should be valued more, and I do more work than other people, and I'm the only one around here who cares about quality. And it's just, even from a founder's perspective, like, no one's committed to me and they don't care about the business as much as I do. Just that chatter that turns into verbal venting, that turns into just focusing on the numbers and the comparison, and whether I'm one up or one down today. Instead of running my own race, I'm focusing on everybody else's time to the finish line. And knowing your benchmarks is important, but running your own race is even more important. And so that was what we defined as ego. And we found out that it's just this enormous source of waste in all of our days.
Yeah, and you touched on a number of things there in terms of how you define ego. And in particular, comparison stuck out for me because I guess at a broader sense, if we're always comparing ourselves to others, particularly say somebody is motivated or has ambitions to start their own business and they're currently working for an investment bank and making X number of dollars and comparing themselves to their peers, but then they strike out on their own and they take a massive, say, 80% pay cut, and the pain of that lifestyle sacrifice for, say, the short term is just too much because they can no longer sort of kick it with their high paid investment banking colleagues or former colleagues and friends and whatnot. And that can often keep people, say, doing a type of work or committing to a pathway that perhaps isn't the most fulfilling just because it means that they can keep up with the quote unquote Joneses.
And I think that the ego gets really attached to success and the outward illustration of success. But I also think there's another thing that happens for people that do this is when you're employed with someone, if you need to grow in your hatred for them to leave them, you're basing your new business on a pretty faulty premise. And what I tell people is, like, if you're an investment banker, learn to stay in peace and enjoy where you are until you're ready to leave, and enjoy it, and then go in peace so that when you do leave, you're not just chasing what you had, you're chasing the feeling that happens when you're living your vision. So instead of focusing on what you're going to do or what you're going to make, focusing on how I want to feel at the end of the day really changes the barometer for the ego. Like, the ego can count money, it can count titles, it can count cars. But what the ego doesn't get when you want to bypass the ego is counting on how you feel at the end of the day. So a game changer for me was, because I left corporate business to start my own, was when I quit counting things like salary and those things, and I really focused on how do I want to feel at the end of today? And did I accomplish that? And it created a whole new metric for me that I would set goals based on how I want to feel at the end of the day and start to value that rather than the comparison of what I had or what I didn't have.
Yeah.
It was really life-changing for me.
Yeah, I think I draw parallels between that and what Stephen Covey talks about in The 7 Habits, which is begin with the end in mind. Of course, he was talking about the end of your life, but I like that you've kind of taken that and packaged that up in terms of the end of the day. How do I want to feel at the end of the day? And I can totally relate to that, having come out of the corporate world many years ago, where I got to the end of the day and I just felt like I hadn't really contributed, or I didn't really feel fulfilled doing the work that I was doing. And having to reframe that metric of success, at least for the first couple of years. Yes, sure, we all want to build businesses that are financially sustainable and successful, but ultimately, without purpose, without fulfillment at the core of what we do, ultimately we're just sacrificing our happiness for society's, say, conventional metrics of success and comparison.
I agree. And I think at some point, at the end of the day, those metrics measure how aligned you are with your own purpose. I find that the more people aligned with their own purpose, the more they are rewarded in more
Yep.
physical, like manifesting ways. And that one's tough because if you're not aware of your ego, you'll sell out short and you'll go for the easy. But there's always a price, right? There's a price to your health. There's a price to your relationships. There's always a price. And so if you measure in ego, metrics, or are you measuring in kind of soul metrics? And I think that's really important. When I go to a party, that's why I was a little disarmed by your question. Like when you're at a party, how do you describe yourself? And my honest answer is a lot of times I don't even describe myself. I want to know about the other person, because when I leave a party, what I feel best about is having connected and really giving somebody the opportunity to feel like their story was heard, or to, understand, create space where there's enough of them and enough of me to, have a good dance together. And, so a lot of that is moving away from, who we are and what we have to what can we possibly create together. And even as an introvert, it gives me the courage, like when I, even come on this podcast, I have a bit of social anxiety where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to, talk to this genius guy, Steve, who's done all this great stuff in the world. And I have to just bring myself back to, it's not about looking good, but it's about the potential that we're going to spend an hour together, maybe creating some conversation that could really help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it gets me jazzed.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's one of the things that I love most about hosting a podcast is connecting with lots of wonderful people like yourself, and actually doing away with all of the noise and being able to go deep on a subject matter, because I feel like today there's so much noise, there's so many distractions, and we don't often give ourselves the liberty to actually just sit down with someone for 1 hour and just dig deep on a particular topic and go off on tangents and whatnot. And that whole process is so rewarding. And what you say about social anxiety, even though this is episode number 183 of Future Squared, before every episode, I still get a sense of social anxiety. But the way I reframe that is, hey, this is an opportunity to meet someone new, to learn something new, and to just have a conversation. It doesn't need to be your best performance ever, whatever that is, because everybody's metric and interpretation is going to be different. And once you let go of that and just see it as an opportunity to just have a conversation, learn, have some fun, it just becomes so much easier. And reframing things is just so powerful. And I think we could talk about that for a little while longer. But what I really wanted to explore next up, Cy, is something you've published in the past, which was how we go about silencing our egos, starting off with depersonalization.
Right. So when you start to become aware of your ego, that's the ultimate breakthrough, right? To realize that your true self is the self that can hear or is witnessing the ego, but that you're always being thought. So when you get up in the morning, you don't think, I'm going to start thinking. You're already being thought. And one of the ways to, exercise being back into the part of your brain that's innovative and collaborative is to really practice depersonalization, that belief that nothing really has to do with me. Really notice when you do ego hooks, like when somebody says something and you attach meaning, like, well, this means that, and I know the future. And when you just add things to it, you're really making things personal. And if you can just edit your story and stay with the literal, someone walks by me and doesn't say hello. All I know is, that they walked by me and potentially didn't say hello. Once I personalize it, which is the work of the ego, I go, well, they are rude. Ever since they got that promotion, they think they're all that in a bag of chips.
Yeah.
See, once I buy into that thought, once I agree with it and buy into it, then it affects my behavior. I treat them rudely because I believe they're rude, so I treat them rudely. Then they respond rudely. I go, see, I'm right about stuff I made up. And now we're co-creating, but we don't realize it. If I can depersonalize it, a great way to do that is by getting mentally flexible. If you walk by me and don't say hello, I could really just think about 10 different reasons for that. Now, if I was good and I was like the Buddha, I could just not make anything up, stay neutral, conserve my energy, go on to add value, just say walk by noted, no more thought needed. But what I do as a professional, I think professionals give people the benefit of the doubt because we're always working to elevate things, to bring things to higher consciousness. And so if you walk by me and don't say hello, if I can get mentally flexible, I can think of a really positive potential explanation for that. Maybe you were deep in prayer and meditation for the peace in the world and didn't see me. And it's not about playing the game or positive thinking, but it's about getting mentally flexible. Because if I can believe that, I can treat you really well, you respond well, and now I'm right about something positive I made up. It really, co-creates some things. So I try and work hard in my day to just not believe that everything's about me or that everything is an insult to me. Because the ego sees insult where there isn't any. It's always, to stay alive, it needs to be angry, and it needs to, eat anger for lunch. It has to stay mildly insulted. So it's always interpreting every event with a slight insult so that it can feed itself. And once you drop that insult or that personalization, life just becomes far more less to react to.
Yeah, and that prompts my thinking to Don Miguel Ruiz's Four Agreements, in which one of the agreements he talks about is don't take things personally, and he tells a story, and I paraphrase, of somebody he met on a train who was just the most rude person, and ultimately, long story short, turns out that person's wife had passed away a couple of days earlier, and that was the reason for their, say, perhaps not being the most pleasant human beings at that time. Now, there's so much evidence or instance of that every single day in everybody's lives where we can react to a certain situation. I could be sitting in traffic and somebody may flip me the bird, and that would just set me off. And ultimately, that's not going to improve my life in any way. In fact, it's going to make it worse. I think it's a Mark Twain quote where resentment is like swallowing a drug, or swallowing poison, hoping it will hurt the other person. Whereas if I just say, look, that person's obviously, maybe they're going through a few different things, maybe they're not that self-aware, maybe they're just reactive, I shouldn't let that affect my state of mind and how I feel right now, and I should just remove the judgment. And I think it's Marcus Aurelius who noted in his journals of about 2,000 years ago that if you remove the judgment of something, you remove the pain, if that judgment is a negative one.
So true. And I love that line that you just said, because I tell people, it's like you can set yourself free here by removing the story or the judgment. Like, you don't need a year for this to work. It could work right now if you just let go of your story.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful saying. It's like, remove the judgment, remove the pain.
Yeah, it's so easy. And I mean, it is something that I guess would require that concerted practice and effort over time. It's just like anything, whether it's mindfulness or meditation or going to the gym or whatever it is, the more you do it, the more it becomes second nature. And it's not as if somebody who's been in a reactive state their whole life and been driven by your ego will listen to this conversation and suddenly start removing the judgment from everything and just live a life of bliss. I don't think that's what we're talking about, but it is about just becoming a little bit more aware of it over time and making that concerted effort. And then in a year's time, you might notice yourself just being in a much more blissful state.
Exactly. And I think that's how it happens. It's just you unhook your ego one by one. And a great place to unhook it is this inquiry, this, just really wondering, like, what do I know for sure? Mm-hmm. And who am I when I believe that story? And just those wonderful prompts, because the ability to edit your story or to, take out your assignment of motive or judgment is, it gets you the ultimate freedom.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And I wanted to hop, skip, and jump over to a topic you've put forward in your book, which is that on employee engagement programs, Cy. You've said that engagement programs, workplace perks, and satisfaction surveys are inflating expectations, sowing unhappiness, and creating a culture of entitlement that fuels said drama and costs organizations millions. Keen to explore this topic.
Absolutely. We don't mean it to be inflammatory, but it certainly has been when you read some of the reviews of I work on Amazon and other places. I absolutely love engagement, and I work hard to create the best environment possible to engage the high accountables in my workplace. workplace. But we have really over-rotated on engagement, so that engagement without accountability has started to create entitlement. And we have seen it as the role of the organization to kind of perfect the circumstances so that people can perform. And that's where we are reinforcing people's victim mindsets, that in order for me to step up and perform, my circumstances have to be perfect. But I would tell you that from all of our research and other people's research, your circumstances aren't the reasons you can't succeed. They're just the reality in which you must succeed. So as we work on all this engagement, it's a good concept, but it's been skewed to the point where we're trying to buy people's love, and low accountables are holding us hostage in a way where they really are. We're reinforcing their mindset that it's not you, it's your circumstances. And accountable people know that their happiness isn't correlated to their circumstances. It's correlated to the amount of accountability they take for their circumstances. So I'm just trying to help people really clean up engagement. In this manner. And when I first came on to my leadership role in a hospital, I had been a therapist, and I had spent years teaching people that you're not responsible for the happiness of another. Someone drinks not because of you, but because they choose to drink. They blame you. They go, oh my gosh, I drank because you didn't keep the kids quiet. That I spent so much time helping people get rid of codependency. It's a true affliction where they believe they're responsible for the happiness of others. Then I got to the workplace, and as a leader, they told me in the States, we measure engagement, and your success, your bonus is based on how happy your people are. You need to keep them happy. And I thought, that's impossible. A person can't create happiness for another person. It's all about their lens, their projection, their personalization, their ego. Now I can foster accountability. I can work not to, create horrible workplaces. But at the end of the day, I can't control or bend reality in their favor. They've got some work they've got to do in terms of accountability. And I just found it wasn't a very shared responsibility, and that it breeded entitlement. And it bred entitlement. And that was actually what we found out in our research.
Yeah. So, and as you said, has received, or I suppose some people may interpret the book as being inflammatory, or some statements as being inflammatory. But what you're saying is not, let's throw out employee engagement programs altogether and go back to, counting widgets and employee clock on, clock off times. That's not it at all. But it is saying maybe we've gone way too far in the engagement side and not given people enough responsibility for their own actions and accountability. Because, we can talk about the fundamental attribution error, which suggests people are a result of their circumstances, and that may well be true for many people. But at the same time, what does that say of people who come from the exact same circumstances? One goes on to become a successful person and the other does not. That would suggest that there is an element of extreme ownership, if I'm to quote Jocko Willink, at play, where that person says, okay, these are my circumstances and I'm going to do the best with that I can.
You got it. And, like the concept, I really talk a lot about change too. And we promoted that change is hard. But what we really deciphered out in our research is change is only hard for the unready. So if you, let's say, held tight to your flip phone, the one you've had since high school, and you refused upgrades as they came, I stayed very technically savvy, and, every upgrade I could, I took the opportunity, and, growth came in bite-sized pieces, and I learned what I needed to learn. And so I'm 27 upgrades ahead of you by keeping up with the times and staying relevant. So let's say our employers give us new smartphones. If change were hard, we would both struggle. But change isn't hard for me, because I'm just grateful. I'm like, oh my gosh, you gave me a new smartphone. I'll go get my stuff in the cloud. And I appreciate you as an employer. Thank you for keeping me challenged, but giving me tools. If you gave somebody who had refused all those upgrades and still was on a flip phone a new smartphone, they would hate you and be curled in the fetal position and be furious that you expected too much from them. And that's an extreme example. But with change, like, we keep slowing things down and coddling the people, and And what I know as a therapist is that the accountability is shared. It's like if you are feeling pain, and that's just where you need to grow next.
Mm.
It's where you need to get skilled up to stay current in this reality. And too many times the organization is blamed for, what the employee needs to go through. But the employee's pain is caused by their lack of readiness or their own choices, not by the reality the employer finds himself needing to succeed in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a hell of a lot of sense, and I think when it comes to pain, oftentimes it's a necessary um, predecessor to growth. And in large organizations today, we see them being disrupted more than ever before, thanks to lower barriers to entry and a lot more startups getting into the game because they can do so with very small investments in capital. And you have people in these organizations who perhaps are quite change averse and keeping organizations or holding organizations back. And rather than exploring emerging technologies, which to them may seem threatening, they're finding ways to play politics instead and slow down the process of change, because change means discomfort, and change means pain, and change means I'm not going to be able to do this as well as I used to do it because it's a completely new thing. But meanwhile, a new up and coming company comes along and cuts away half of your market share, and then you start scratching your head saying, well, how did this happen?
And that takes us right back to the ego, because resistance to change is the work of the ego. The ego doesn't like disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times I find people resisting change, and the people that are resisting change are the ones who aren't ready. So if I keep myself ready, and I know that much of the world is moving to social media, then I'm ready for that. I just step into that. But if I'm not ready, my only choice is to resist change. Otherwise, I'll be exposed as unready. And there's a lot to think about in there, because we really at times coddle the people. And even when I talk about change management, how we roll it out in businesses, we try and keep change least disruptive to the people. And we teach business readiness, like keep people, ensure that your team's in a constant state of readiness so that change is least disruptive to the business. And it's really just helping leaders refocus on not coddling the people, but calling the people up to greatness, supporting them in growing and operating at a higher level of consciousness that's spurred on by this direct relationship with reality that's not filtered out by the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And, my name is Yes. Where the market goes, I go,
Yep.
And I still have my ethics. I still have my morals. But, if for instance, in our business, a lot of folks, we work with Vayner Talent, and we focus on feeding our masses through social media. And I am in an industry of speaking and consulting where a lot of these companies have pretty large sales force.
Mm-hmm.
And they are working hard to, have booths at conferences and to, keep the sales force busy. And they're just muscling their way through it. And for us, I looked at my millennials, and the millennials are never sold to by a salesperson. They're influenced by influencers online.
Yeah.
And so we very quickly just said, where are the millennials going? Where's the world going? Let's, jump into online influencers. And I can tell you that so many of my colleagues just don't get it. They're like, so you give everything away for free, and then people still want to pay you to come in. I'm like, you got it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they just can't get it. And that will be the death of their company, not because they weren't forewarned, but because they didn't stay relevant and keep up with the times, because they're in a mindset of I know, and we need to get into an I don't know mindset and just say, world, teach me. Let me be an observer of who is in this abundant world, who is manifesting some things that are really working well, and how can I, without comparison, just learn from that wonderful example and move in that direction as well. And so it's waking up every day, just being willing to walk into the mystery and be a student, instead of walking in with all this knowledge going, I know, and I'm going to muscle my way through it. Because the only thing we know is what worked in the past. Mm-hmm. We don't know what will work in the future. That's what we need to walk with an open mind about.
Yeah, definitely. And the rate of change is accelerating. So getting more adept at being in that constant change of readiness can only be a good thing. And it's something we practice here at Collective Campus with my team. Every month we draw up a quadrant on a whiteboard, and it basically has 4 columns, well, 4 quadrants rather: do more, do less, start doing, stop doing. And that just gets us all to not only critically think about, are there particular technologies or products or services or customer segments or geographies or whatnot that we should go after or stop going after, or something new we should explore. That helps the business grow, but it also puts people in that constant state of readiness, because they realize that's the nature of the organization, that's the culture we're building, and we're always experimenting and trying new things. And I think, granted, it is easier to apply that in a smaller organization. I mean, we're a team of 12 at the moment, than it would be, say, in a large bureaucratic organization with 5,000 to 10,000 employees that's regulated by a number of different bodies. But you need to start with the awareness, and you need to be intentional about creating that if you are serious about survival, because ultimately these large firms are accountable to their shareholders in many cases, and unless they're willing to put their organizations in that constant change of readiness, then they're not going to have many happy shareholders.
And I agree with that. And I would just challenge both of us not to feed into the excuse like it's harder in big organizations, because people tell me, Cy, it's just not my culture. Mm-hmm. And I say, quit worrying about your culture. Mm-hmm. Worry about your climate. You have 12 people on your team. Do that. That's an amazing exercise to do. I love it. You've got 12 people or 20 or 30 on your team. Do it with them. And just focus on your climate. And when enough climates are doing it, the culture changes. It's like a good type of global warming. Mm-hmm. But culture really is just our agreed upon stories and excuses about why we can't. I just don't even know that culture really exists except for manufactured in our minds. But climate is what you can influence on the daily, whether you're part of an ecosystem that's 40,000 employees or 12 employees. And what I love about what you're doing is you're really breaking away from the old paradigm. Like in our company, we don't even use the word change. We just use the word next. So people don't say there's too much change. We're like, there's what's next. And we don't talk about how we're going to adapt to the change. We just talk about what's next. What do we know today and what's next? And that's what I love about your quadrants is you're just looking at what's next. What do we, for next, need to do less of, more of, and I think it's depersonalizing it and taking the surprise, panic, and blame and the drama out of it. But really just focusing on, let's start with beginner's mind and take a look at what we know and what we don't know. Mm-hmm. And make some next decisions around that. And you can do that. I work with huge corporations, and I teach leaders to do that in the climate they have in front of them, on the daily, and control what you can. What's your sphere of control? And we may not be able to get the whole business to stop doing something, but in our world, we can stop doing things that don't make sense and don't matter, and better deliver on our promises to the business and to the customer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, despite the fact that an organization may have, say, 40,000 employees, they are comprised of lots of smaller business units of 5 to 20 employees, and you can have those conversations, and you can start to build that climate, as you said, of one that doesn't use the word change but uses the word next. And I think I'm going to steal that from my team, Cy. I think we're going to stop saying change and just say next. I love that. So I think I wanted to touch on one last thing before we throw you into our lightning round, Cy, and that was on the topic of emotionally inexpensive people, what they are. And I think we kind of have a reasonable idea as to what they are, but how do we attract them to our organizations?
Just for people to really understand that the new value of someone isn't their performance. That's pass fail. We expect everybody to perform. Mm-hmm. The true value is if they stay ready for what's next, right? Their potential. But we have to really focus on at what cost, like not just their salary and benefits, but in addition to that, what are they costing us with their drama quotient? And it's not just that they're drama kings and queens, but they resist change, or they're not accountable. They blame their circumstances. The interesting thing is how you attract them to your own organizations. A couple of things. Quit over promising. I used to, when I recruited people, tell them all the good things about our organization, hoping they would pick us. And I quit doing that. I started to tell them that we work hard, but we play hard. And there are times that we are there at 2 a.m. because we will do everything we can to fulfill our promises to our clients. And we reward the high accountables. And I had fewer people stay with the process of being a recruit. But the ones that I did recruit, they really signed up because they were aligned with our vision and mission. But most of us focus on trying to please everybody. And I would tell you that the same behavior can't please a high accountable and a low accountable at the same time. You've got to differentiate. And a lot of people tell me, there's hard workers or good workers are hard to find. And so they'll lower their standards. And what I tell them is like, it's that on the macro, maybe we have a talent shortage, but on the micro, the true shortage is good places for high accountables to work. So if you can create low drama workplaces and really go after with the highest standards, the people who are privileged to join the environment, and you keep that environment pristine so that it is a low drama environment for high accountables to work, you'll win. And stay out of the crazy thinking that there's not enough people to work, because I tell people, if you and I, Steve, are being chased by a tiger, I need to remember that I don't have to beat the tiger. I've just got to beat you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if the tiger is talent shortage, I don't have to beat the national or international talent shortage. I have to just beat other crappy places to work that put up with drama and don't differentiate and reward the high accountables. I can create an environment beyond ego in my workplace. And I tell you how to do that in the book, where you differentiate and attract and retain those very special folks that are high accountable, not because of you, but because of their own work in their own life, their own self-evolution. And those are folks that are desperate for great places to work, where we aren't trying to please everybody and buy people's love and engage everybody. They really are desperate for great places to work. And I tell you, even though we're a small company, we find them and we keep them.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, what you've talked about there, and I guess there's all types of people in the world. I recently had a conversation with Gretchen Rubin, who published the 4 tendencies, in which she was talking about people who are either upholders, as in they respond to internal and external expectations, obligers, where they respond to external expectations only, so they'll do something for someone else, but they'll often fail to take care of themselves or meet their deadlines. Say they want to go to the gym, but they don't do that unless someone else is keeping them accountable. There was also questioners who'll do something if they can justify it, and then rebels who just do whatever the hell they want to do. So, I mean, based on that type of personality profile, it sounds like someone like a obliger who meets external expectations, or an upholder who also meets external expectations, is the type of person that will fall into this accountability-based framework, because they're all about meeting those expectations of themselves, whether from their employer or whether from something much deeper inside themselves.
Absolutely. And I love those categories. I hadn't heard those, although I love her. I'm familiar with her early work. I would want an upholder. Obligers eventually come to hate you because they blame you at some point for their not taking care of themselves. So in the interim, obligers get their work done, and God bless them. But if they aren't taking care of themselves, eventually they're going to find dissatisfaction and potentially blame their boss or their company. So I love that concept. I think the ultimate high accountable is that upholder, and that's such a great term. I'll dig into her work. Thank you for teaching me that.
I'll send you some stuff. I think she found that 10% of her research audience were upholders. So maybe they're the needles in the haystack.
Yeah, we found about 15%.
10 to 15%. Yeah, that sounds about right as well. Look, Cy, you've given us a hell of a lot of value bombs today. I really enjoyed the conversation because it has looked at a lot of, say, conventional management science and psychology and human resource sort of philosophies today from a different lens. And I'll let our audience make up their own minds, but to me a lot of this stuff makes a hell of a lot of sense. But that's maybe because I consider myself an upholder who it does thrive in that framework, in an environment where accountability comes first, rather than, hey, we've got this awesome employee engagement program and dental care and foosball tables and bean bags and all that sort of stuff. Like, for me, it's all about purpose and something that actually drives me and gets me up in the morning and gets me excited and leaves me feeling fulfilled at the end of the day. So absolutely love this conversation. But before we go, Cy, we've got to throw you into our 3-question lightning round with the 3 minutes we have left. Are you ready to rock and roll?
Okay,
Let,
awesome.
let's do this. Question number 1 was, if you had to work for another organization and you could do so at any stage of the company life cycle, so we could be talking about Apple in 1974, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. I actually would like to have worked in healthcare with the nuns about the late 1800s
Uh-huh.
because they were badass women who just said, screw this thing. If we can make a difference, it's up to us. Let's go in and do it. And they just gave preferential treatment to the poor. They just made it happen. There's all these incredible women. So early in healthcare, where people didn't think healthcare was a basic right, they just went beyond the government, went beyond everything, and just said, serve the people. I think it was miraculous.
Yeah, and that comes back full circle to what we talked about at the start of the show, which was choice. They had a choice and they decided to just go forward and take action, which is awesome. Question number 2, Cy. If you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask?
Oh my gosh. It would be Rumi. It would be Rumi, and it would be hard to, the poet, the Sufi poet, Rumi.
Uh-huh.
And I would ask him what the face of God looked like. I believe he saw the face of God. I'd ask him to describe for me what that looked like.
Oh, wow. That's really, really deep. I like that answer. Yeah, wow, that's cool. It's interesting, the different types of answers we've had over time. People going back to, say, Benjamin Franklin, Steve Jobs, what would he make of Apple today? And I really like that. What would the face of God look like? I think we had Jamie Wheel from the Flow Genome Project say something like, I would like to go back and stare at Jesus Christ and just look into his eyes and get the measure of the man. And I was like, wow, that's pretty deep.
Oh, I love that.
Love,
That's really deep.
Yeah, it was full on. I was like, whoa, it was too early in the morning for that. But anyway, last question, Sai, is what kind of rituals or routines do you have, if any, that you partake in on a daily basis to help you stay on top of your game? Obviously, 8 kids, you're publishing books, you're a keynote speaker, you're traveling on your book tour, well, you're about to embark on your book tour. How do you keep kicking goals?
I would tell you the biggest change in my life, and it's twice a day, 20 minutes, is transcendental meditation. I discovered that about 3 years ago, and it's been mind-blowing, best thing I ever did. That, and another ritual is my husband and I, no matter where we're at, check in via text morning and night, and just make sure that he and I both know that we're very well loved in the world.
Perfect. Love that. So yeah, oftentimes I find it does come back to some type of mindfulness practice or exercise, which is for many people a form of mindfulness and letting go of ego and balancing yourself and centering yourself, but also community, whether that's family, whether that's friends. So love that answer. And yeah, people in our audience should check out TM. I'll add some resources to the show notes on transcendental meditation. As for the show notes, people can refer to that to find out a little bit more about your book, No Ego, which is available on Amazon. If they want to connect with you on Twitter, Cy, they can do so at Cy Wakeman. That's CYWAKEMAN. They can check out your website at realitybasedleadership.com. Is there anywhere else they should go to find out more and connect?
We're very prolific in putting content out there, so they can subscribe to YouTube at Cy Wakeman, Instagram at Cy Wakeman, Facebook at Cy Wakeman, all the social media channels. And I too have a podcast. I'm just a baby podcaster. I've had 7 whopping sessions.
Whoa. The first episode is the hardest, so.
Yeah, my podcast is No Ego, so I hope that people join me. And Steve, this has been fabulous. Thank you for the opportunity to just share some space today.
No worries. It has been, like I said, an awesome conversation. So thank you so much for giving up some time, particularly on book launch day. So I can imagine you're super busy, but it's something like 7:30 p.m. over in Omaha. So maybe I think you've earned yourself a bit of a rest. Get ready for day 2 of the book launch. I'm sure it's going to be a big few weeks ahead, and I just wish you all the best of luck with the book.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Cy. Hey guys, it's Steve again. If you're picking up what we're putting down, we'd love it if you took just a minute of your time to like, share, or subscribe to Future Squared on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. It would mean a hell of a lot to the team here who work effortlessly to bring you thought leaders and experts on topics of corporate innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement on a weekly basis. As always, you can find more resources on innovation, including blogs, books, podcasts, videos, webinars, and tools at www.collectivecamp.us. If you'd like to connect with me on Twitter, you can do so at Steve Glaveski. That's Glaveski. Until next time, keep innovating. Future Squared out.